Number 10. Quintavious Quire. Well, you might think Quinton Quire, as he was previously known, aka Kid Omega, has no place on this list because he is so powerful. Lately, he hasn't proved to be as useful in the comics. Rather, in the dawn of X-Line, it's actually becoming a running gag that he is killed on a regular basis, often coming in with a pretty decent plan of attack that either he messes up or everything just kind of goes sideways, whether he's appearing in comics like X-Force or Wolverine. However, despite the fact that his death toll continues to climb when it comes to his own death and resurrection count, it should be acknowledged that Quintavious is a master telepath and telekinetic, who is known for being an Omega level mutant, hence his alias is Kid Omega.
Number 9. NFL Super Pro. Now, anyone else remember when Marvel teamed up with the National Football League to make a promotional series about a pun-loving, crime-fighting ex-football player with superpowers? No? Well, that is totally okay, I also forgot about it too. Phil Grayfield, aka SUPERPRO, had his football career cut short after injuring himself while saving a child and decided to then take up a career as a sports reporter. Grayfield then just so happens to interview an all-ball chemist and superfan who just so happens to have invented a practically indestructible football uniform. Then for some reason a group of thieves comes in, takes what they want, ties Grayfield to a chair, and decides to burn up the rest of the scientist's things, including the suit. The combination of the heat and the fumes from the chemist's supplies end up giving Grayfield superpowers, which he then uses to pummel every bad guy in sight. What powers did he gain? Well, just invulnerability. That's about it. Sure, that's great and super useful, but other than that, he's just an average person, so if I were any other hero, I would honestly just leave him on the bench.
Number 8. Jubilee. For me, myself, even I originally thought of the 90s cartoon when I thought of Jubilee, that young girl who could shoot fireworks out of her fingers. Sure, it's distracting, but Jubilee was never really as useful in a fight because of her powers. But the reality is, it's not actually Jubilee's powers that made her appear less than useful in the X-Men animated series, which, by the way, has the best intro music of any cartoon ever, save for maybe DuckTales. Rather, it was likely her inexperience that simply held her back. In the comics, it's been hinted at that Jubilee is actually far more powerful than she sometimes appears. Her powers allow her to create fireworks, but they also give her the potential to detonate matter at a subatomic level, which means she also has the potential to create an explosion similar to the detonation of a hydrogen bomb, or even more powerful, a cataclysmic quark-splosion.
Number 7. Mr. Immortal. Craig Hollis, the leader and founder of the Great Lakes Avengers. Now, you can probably guess what his powers are, right? He has the ability to heal and resurrect himself from any injury he faces, no matter how severe it might be, effectively making him immortal. He discovered the skill after several suicide attempts and eventually decided to make the best of it and fling himself into danger without fear because, I mean, if you can't die, what is there to really be scared of? The only real problem related to this insanely useful power is that he can still feel pain. And whenever he comes back to life, he goes into these crazy fits of rage because of how much pain he goes through while coming back to life. The only one who could calm him down was Dinosaur, his quote-unquote soulmate. However, after her death, there was no one able to really help him. Honestly, that's about it for this character if I'm being honest. Although he has this amazing power, he is incapable of using it to its full potential because he lacks training. Basically, he is just a walking, talking, raging punching bag that has died a total of 21 plus times. Check him out for yourself, starting with his first appearance in 1989's West Coast Avengers, Volume 2, number 46. Number 6. Doorman. Another member of the Great Lake Avengers on our list today, Damar Davis, aka Doorman, is a guy who can use his body to make a door. As you know, his name states. Put a little less simply, Doorman is a Class 10 teleporter with his body acting as a portal to the Dark Force dimension, and thanks to this connection he can allow people and items to pass through him and walk through any solid object that he is pressed up against. This was the only power he had for a pretty long time, although he did eventually gain the ability to levitate, which led to flight. But in regards to his main power, it's pretty cool in theory, but it only allows people to go to the room or space directly next to them, which is great, you know, if you're trying to make a quick getaway to confuse someone, but if you need a quick escape to, you know, anywhere else, then I think you're out of luck. Also, in a world of superpowered beings who can literally break down walls, teleport long distances, and even just straight up pick locks, he's not the most useful to have on your team, you know? In short, great power in theory, in practice, not so much. Check him out for yourself in his first appearance in 1989's West Coast Avengers Volume 2, number 46. Number 5. Color Kid. Born on the planet Lupra, Ulavac got his powers when he was hit by a beam of colorful light from another dimension while working in a science lab. The accident imbued him with the ability to change the color of any object, no matter how big or small, and then from then on he was known as Color Kid. Needless to say, but his ability was underwhelming to say the least, and he was denied acceptance into DC's Legion of Heroes and instead was forced to join the Legion of Substitute Heroes, which is essentially the B team, but probably more like the C team for superpowered crime fighters. I will say though, Color Kid did manage to make the most of his pretty useless skills. His color change abilities not only changed the hue of an object, but on at least one occasion was able to change the chemical makeup of the object and was able to save Superboy and Supergirl from a deadly kryptonite cloud. Not only that, he figured out how to tweak his ability to throw off his enemies and to camouflage himself and others around him. Check him out for yourself in 1966's Adventure Comics number 342. Number 4. CYPHER. Doug Ramsey was always closely related to Charles Xavier and his school for gifted youngsters from a very young age, as his dad was a lawyer who helped Xavier figure out all the legal aspects of everything. However, he wasn't actually a part of the school despite Xavier believing him to be a mutant. Doug's mutant power gave him the ability to understand and speak any language, human and alien alike, and while that is really impressive and would definitely come in handy, it's not super useful as a superhero, you know? This had the unintended effect of making CYPHER a really annoying addition to the X-Men roster. He actually proved to be so annoying that a ton of fans wrote in begging him to be killed off. Realizing CYPHER brought nothing to the table, series writer Louise Simonson complied. But every Marvel fan knows that deaths in comics are never permanent, and he was eventually resurrected, but he still sucked so much, even though he had new powers including advanced computer skills and also the ability to sense structural weaknesses in buildings. You know, he honestly just wasn't meant to be a superhero, I think. Take a look at this underwhelming hero story for yourself, starting with 1984's New Mutants number 13. Number 3. GENIE. Becca Parker was a member of Ecstatics, a group of mutant superheroes who were more preoccupied with becoming rich and famous than doing anything altruistic, like, you know, saving the world. What's her power, you ask? Well, she has the ability to generate seismic vibrations, which is pretty cool, right? Well, no, actually, because in order to use her powers, she has to be rip-roaring drunk. And the more drunk she gets, the more her power could grow. This is a pretty risque and problematic idea for a superhero, as her dependence on alcohol actually landed her on several most offensive lists. Not to mention, it also made her a terrible fighter. When she was drunk, GENIE occasionally aimed her seismic waves at her fellow Ecstatics team members, meaning she was often more of a liability than an asset. Thankfully for everyone, but not so thankfully for her, her career as a superhero was cut short when she died while on a mission. Honestly, I'm kinda glad I never learned about her as a kid, because the whole, you know, drinking gives you superpowers thing is not a good message to send out to kids.
Number 2. Angel. Angel definitely has to be one of the least useful superheroes and mutants. At the end of the day, his main power is flight, which, sure, when the X-Men first came to be was like pretty crazy, and even, dare I say, exhilarating. After all, who doesn't want to fly? While flight is by no means a useless power, the problem with Angel these days is it's kinda all he has, that and his hollow bones. Especially considering he is not Archangel currently, so he doesn't have metal wings with poison-tipped feathers, nor are his wings sharp enough to be used as blades. So as a mutant in battle, he's in theory pretty useless. But his power of flight is not. I would even argue that Warren Worthington III has a more useful power in his abilities as a businessman, which we'll likely see celebrated even more during the new X-Corp comic we're supposed to get sometime in the future.
And number 1, Razorback. Now I have to say, upon first glance, you would definitely not be able to guess what powers Razorback actually possesses. Think it has something to do with warthogs? Well, you would actually be wrong, because its actual power is the mutant ability to drive or pilot any vehicle very well. All of which he, for some reason, names Big Pig. Now, it's not really explained how he got his powers or why he wears the warthog headpiece, but hey, I'm not one to judge. I wear high-waisted jeans and overalls, so to each their own. Also, I thought I should mention that the mane of his super stylish headpiece is also electrified, but that limited power is totally cancelled out by the indignity of having to wear an oversized furry helmet that not only limits mobility, but also peripheral vision, which is kind of needed for his whole mutant ability. All I have to say is that when you're in a universe with multiple characters that are capable of destroying literal planets, an expert wheelman really isn't all that helpful. However, in the real world, that is super helpful, because I know I've been in cars that I cannot figure out. Number 10, Silverclaw. Maria Santiago, aka Silverclaw, was born near the village of Kamakiri in South America, and this village was filled with simple folk whose ancestors worshipped the ancient gods until the arrival of the Spaniards. Her father was a native of the village who was constantly ridiculed for his beliefs, and his daughter was no different as she was ridiculed for, well, different reasons. You've heard of werewolves, right? Well, Maria had the interesting ability to transform into a variety of were forms, including jaguar, anaconda, cockatoo, monkey, sloth, and cheetah. And they were unfortunately uncontrollable for a while, which was not too great to say the least because it scared a lot of people. Now fast forward a bit and we see Silverclaw join the Avengers during the Civil War arc. And in this arc she fought Captain Marvel, who was attempting to get her to sign the Superhuman Registration Act. Silverclaw was pretty against the SHRA as it was not the law in her country and she was not a US citizen. Now as a result, a pitched battle between the two occurred with Silverclaw able to just so close evade arrest. After Captain America's assassination, she did voluntarily surrender and was registered as a US citizen. Now why is she so useless? Well, because she's not only just a bit lame of a character, but she didn't really do anything of worth that landed her a permanent position on the Avengers team. Now I do like her power though, I can't lie.
Number 9, Swordsman. Okay, so I'll give you that Swordsman was at least talented in his art form, but at the end of the day, he's just a guy with good sword skills. You might be thinking, who are you going to rag on next, Amanda? Clint Barton? You also might be thinking, Amanda, wow, did you just use the term rag? Are you from like the 1930s? I'm not, though I should be maybe. And no, I'm not going to insult Hawkeye by putting him on this list. While there are many other Avengers who are just humans with superpower-like skill sets, Clint at least is also a super interesting character. Swordsman, however, remains quite dated, relegated to being a hero of the past. He might have been good with the sword, but that also wasn't enough to have him save himself and also save his true love Mantis at the same time. Tisk tisk. And sure, Swordsman may have returned as a cooler Katati version of himself, but let's not forget that this is technically a different character. As while his Katati version has all of Swordsman Jacques Duquesne's memories, he is still an entity separate from Swordsman, and made more interesting by the fact that he is part of the alien Katati race, let's be honest.
Number 8, StarFox. Now originally named Eron and rechristened Eros at the age of 5, StarFox is the son of two Eternals who has a pretty interesting power to say the least. Now what's that power, you ask? Well, he has the ability to manipulate the pleasure centers of the brain of any people within 25 feet of himself. This power emanates from him at all times and causes people to feel, well, good. And by concentrating just a little bit more, he can provoke extremely pleasurable sensations and make a person highly aroused, euphoric, or totally sedated depending on what the situation calls for. Eros has spent most of his life fighting his power-hungry brother Thanos, and that's right, that Thanos. And honestly, you'd think that being related to one of the biggest and strongest bad guys in all of Marvel history would make you a pretty useful ally, but sadly you'd be wrong. The Avengers admitted him to their training program and gave him the name StarFox since they felt Eros was a little inappropriate for a code name. And he served the Avengers faithfully for several months, helping them vanquish enemies like the Wizard, Terminus, and Maelstrom. That being said though, when he first joined the Avengers, he intentionally failed to mention his ability. Needless to say, when they found out, he didn't last. Number 7, Matter Eater Lad. Now I'm definitely someone who is pretty adventurous with what I eat, but there are some things that I absolutely refuse to eat just because I don't like them. Like, I don't know, pickles. I really am not a fan. But that is where Matter Eater Lad comes in, the superhero who literally ate his way out of all of his problems. Tenzo Kim is an alien from the planet Bismol, and much like Stoneboy, Matter Eater Lad's powers are the result of his planet's inhabitants evolving in response to an unexpected tragedy. When all the food on Bismol became inedible thanks to some pesky microbes, the Bismolians adapted by becoming able to eat and digest anything and everything, which was apparently a good enough power to land him a spot on the League of Substitute Heroes. In addition to being able to put down random objects that he consumes, Matter Eater Lad can also analyze matter's contents, determining if it contains poison, and then he metabolizes his food quickly in order to obtain super speed and use his special Bismolian digestive enzymes in order to make tough materials like steel just a lot easier to consume. Honestly, being able to eat anything and everything might make for a great party trick and one that I would love to have in real life, but in the world of comics, it's not necessarily the most useful in the situations that anyone faces.
Number 6, Bouncing Boy. Chuck Tane is just what he sounds like, a superhero with the ability to resemble and act like a giant bouncing ball, which his superhero name is an obvious play on. His powers make him not only super bouncy, but also grant him great durability. While many write him off as being a fairly useless hero, and he did fail in his tryouts for the Legion of Superheroes twice, Bouncing Boy did manage to prove how useful his ability could be, especially considering he has worked hard to become a skilled combatant who also has the ability to calculate the correct trajectories for his bounces, allowing him to target specific and sometimes multiple assailants or points of interest.
Number 5, Stone Boy. a member of the Legion of Substitute Heroes, a group of C-list, moderately superpowered individuals who got together after being rejected from the Legion of Superheroes. Stoneboy is definitely an open book when it comes to his powers because there's not a whole lot below the surface. I say this because he is a member of the alien race from the planet Zwen, whose inhabitants turn to stone in order to hibernate their way through their 6-month-long winters. On Earth, Stoneboy generally uses his ability in some pretty odd and funny ways. Now originally he was unable to move or stay awake while in his stone state, further proving his, uselessness. So his teammates would throw him at enemies, drop him on their heads, or just use him as a distraction. Eventually, thanks to a bit of hypnotherapy, Stoneboy figured out how to remain conscious and even move while using his powers, but nevertheless, his skills are pretty underwhelming in a universe where mobile rock monsters and heroes are pretty much the norm. But I mean, hey, I can't turn to stone, and I'm assuming you can't either, so who are we to judge?
Number 4, Infectious Lass. Admittedly, Infectious Lass is not a master of her abilities, but if she were, gee, that would be something. She could quickly become the most useful superhero like that. Sept is an alien from the planet Somater. Her people have bodies that house tons of microorganisms, which she uses on her enemies, making them sick. Unfortunately, she's not great at controlling her strange power, which sometimes leads to her infecting those that she does not mean to infect. Still, if she had better control, this power itself seems like it would be quite useful. Number 3, Jocasta. Jocasta could have been super cool, but she was kind of relegated to just being Ultron's tattletale and almost loyal mate. She was built by Ultron to be his mate and bride in a sense, sort of like the story of Frankenstein's bride. At first he had tried to transfer the mind of Janet Van Dyne into Jocasta. This actually succeeded, but just made Janet in Jocasta's robotic body seek to tell the Avengers what was going on, and they put a stop to Ultron's madness, reversing the procedure. Jocasta would return a few more times in the comics, but never make much of an impression. She actually could have been a really cool character, but it always feels like she's never really given much of a chance to shine. Still often being resorted to plots where Ultron wants to merge her with Janet, even in the modern day. She was granted Avengers status when she decided to sacrifice herself in order to destroy the Evolutionaries' base before she died in the process. And Avengers Annual Issue 17 out of 1988.
Number 2, Stingray. Dr. Walter Newell was a brilliant oceanographer and engineer who supervised the construction of a domed undersea city with plans to grow food for mankind. The city was attacked by the Plunderer, but he was stopped by the Atlanteans Namor, the Submariner, and Lady Dorma, but unfortunately the city was destroyed. Now in response to this, he designed a suit specifically for the deep sea exploration that he named Stingray, as much of the design was based on manta rays. The suit can safely operate in depths of up to 1,200 feet, has a unique oxygen diffusion system based on fish gills, grants Newell superhuman strength and durability to handle underwater conditions, and is able to swim at high speeds underwater. Now Newell can also glide when not in the water, which is a pretty sweet add-on if I do say so myself. Also should probably mention that the main weapon of the suit is a potent electrical blast, so the name Stingray is definitely fitting. In all honesty, the only reason Stingray was ever an Avenger was because the team needed to use his Hydro base as a launch site when the US government placed airspace restrictions preventing the Avengers from launching Quinjets to downtown Manhattan. Other than that, he really didn't offer much else for the team. Sorry, man.
Number 1, Dr. Druid. Dr. Druid was Anthony Ludgate, originally a student of psychology and psychiatry who was very much interested in the ancient powers of druids and those of the occult. He wasn't such a bad hero to begin with, but quickly became overshadowed by greater mystic heroes such as Doctor Strange. He also studied under the Ancient One, and after some successful heroic pursuits was made an Avenger. However, he became bewitched by Ravonna Renslayer and did some pretty awful things, like manipulating the Avengers into making him chairman, usurping Captain Marvel aka Monica Rambeau, who held the title previously. Following this, he got lost in the time stream, and when he returned, used his hypnotism to swindle someone out of their property so he could rent it out to make money and spend his days drinking. Since then, he has died, returned, and become more of a villainous character in the comics, with his Avengers membership being revoked. Which makes sense.
Number 10, Aquaman. Now I'll admit this one kind of started out as a joke, because nobody likes Aquaman, but I'm not too far off when I say he's got some useful powers. So Aquaman isn't really all that useless. People only really think that because of the Super Friends cartoon, but if you look pretty much anywhere else, he is pretty badass and is often one of the few things able to defend the world against invasions of demons and such thanks to his trident. This is the reason that he's at the very beginning of this list today. Now that being said though, outside of the water he is a little bit more vulnerable than he is when he's in the deep, but that doesn't make him any less of a threat for the baddies that he goes up against. Thanks to his Atlantean physiology, he possesses superhuman strength, stamina, and durability, alongside marine telepathy that allows him to talk and to command sea creatures, and he's also just a ruthless and capable fighter. No matter how much we all make fun of him, he has some pretty useful powers, so check him out in his first appearance in 1959's Adventure Comics number 260. Number 9. Rainbow Girl. Hailing from the planet Zolnar, Dory Aderson wanted to become a member of the Legion of Superheroes in order to work her way into the acting world. She started that journey after she managed to score a trip to Metropolis by using her powers to win the Miss Zolnar contest. What powers am I talking about? Well, Dory has the ability to wield the powers of the emotional spectrum. However, she has very little control over it, and this results in some uncontrollable mood swings every now and then. Dory will turn red when she's angry, blue when she's hopeful, and she also has the ability to surround herself in a rainbow-like pheromone field that causes Dory to be found irresistible to pretty much everyone around. She's essentially a human mood ring, if you will. Needless to say, but with these powers, she did not make it onto the Legion of Superheroes roster and instead settled for a spot on the Legion of Substitute Heroes after marrying a wealthy man on Earth. All in all, there are worse powers that you could have. Like, I can see these being useful in some situations, but if given the choice, Rainbow Girl is certainly not the first person I would call if I needed help. Check her out in her first appearance in 1963's Adventure Comics number 309. Number 8. Maggot. As with most mutants, they're either really strong, really weird, or just really lame. Well, Maggot skips the first one altogether and is just really weird and lame. Born in South Africa, this mutant has probably the most unusual digestive system ever, as it houses 2 slugs named Eenie and Meanie, who are able to leave his body, eat anything they want, and then crawl back into his guts. Now, as gross as it sounds, this whole process helps him grow in size, stamina, and speed, and also turns his skin blue and his eyes red in the process. Pretty cool, right? Well, yes and no, because the slugs have to enter through his stomach in a very precise manner to be effective, meaning if they're even just a millimeter off, then nothing happens. Maggot also has psychometric powers, meaning he's able to see things from the recent past or the immediate future. Honestly, these are all very useful and good powers, but with how meticulous and finicky they are, it just makes for a terrible hero. And to top it all off, he is just not written in a way that makes for any satisfying battles. Check him out in his first appearance in 1997's Uncanny X-Men number 345, and let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with me.
Number 7. Two-Gun Kid. Another human, Two-Gun Kid is a Western-style hero. Sure, Westerns are cool, but Two-Gun Kid is basically just a cowboy. Take away his guns and his horse Lightning, and there ain't much there to work with. We aren't talking about the original Two-Gun Kid either. The original Two-Gun Kid was Clay Harder, who first appeared in 1948 in Two-Gun Kid issue number 1. This version of Two-Gun Kid, Matt Hawk, would not appear until 1962 in issue 60 of the series. He doesn't have superpowers and he's literally from the 1870s, so he wouldn't be a very knowledgeable hero in the modern day. In fact, when he came to the modern day, he had Hawkeye show him around, became an honorary member of the Avengers, but then decided he missed his own time period, so returned home. Peace.
Number 6. Demolition Man. Born and raised in Detroit, Dennis Dunphy idolized superheroes ever since a young age. After not getting drafted onto any professional football teams, which was kind of his dream as an adult, he was approached by an agent of the Power Broker and offered the chance to undergo a process to increase his physical strength to superhuman levels, hoping that this would increase his chances of becoming a professional football player. Obviously, he agreed and had his strength boosted, but with his newfound power, he actually couldn't safely compete against any other regular athletes. Not too long after, Captain America took an interest in Power Broker Inc. because of one of its clients, the Super Patriot, and then soon after, Dunphy allied himself with Rogers, created a costume based on Daredevil and Wolverines, and captured Carl Malice, the head scientist. This unfortunately resulted in Dunphy's own capture though, and he was subjected to more tests, which resulted in a bit of a heart attack. Captain America thankfully saved him and nursed him back to health, and for a time, Dunphy acted as Steve's telephone hotline operator. When Cap reformed the Avengers, he gave D-Man a call, though one can't shake the feeling it was mostly out of sympathy. D-Man was quickly forgotten and lived a sad life as a homeless person before resorting to villainy. Dennis is a very nice guy, and hopefully he gets help, but he's really just not Avengers material. Should've stuck to being Steve's secretary, man.
Number 5. Doombot. This is what happens when you let Hank Pym run the Avengers. In the series Avengers AI, Hank leads his own Avengers team. Who does he decide to put on it? Let's see. Doombot. Let's also acknowledge that this only happened because after one of the many battles against and defeats of Ultron, Hank decided keeping artificial intelligence as prisoners was bad, but he had no qualms with reprogramming them, which also seems morally ambiguous in my opinion. He also had no problem with putting tiny black holes inside them, which also seems very irresponsible. True facts. Hank reprogrammed the Doombot to be loyal to him and made him a member of his artificially intelligent Avengers team, whose roster also included Victor Mancha and Protector. Yeah. Pym probably just shouldn't get to lead Avengers teams in my opinion. Certainly not AI ones either. He also created Ultron, so Doombot wasn't completely useless as he was still a Doombot, but wasn't useful enough to be remembered. Sad face. After the AI Avengers disbanded, the rest of the Avengers lost track of him, or didn't care to keep up, and we didn't really see him again until he reappeared to help his teammate Victor Mancha find a new body in the 2017 Runaway series. Also, you should read that because it's really good.
Number 4, Triathlon. Delroy Garrett Jr. is a pretty exceptional human, I won't lie. I mean, he wound up making it into the Olympic Games and won a total of 3 gold medals, so obviously he's got some talent, right? Well, I hate to break it to you, but not really, as he tested positive for steroids and was basically banned from sports for life after that. Turning to religion, Garrett ended up joining a cult that bestowed him with the powers of 3D Man, which basically meant that he gained various superhuman physical attributes that are approximately 3 times greater than that of even the finest human athlete. Pretty much he gained the powers he got from steroids without the steroids. Captain America eventually recruited Triathlon for the Secret Avengers, a team that worked against the Superhuman Registration Act, but Triathlon kept pushing for the main Avengers to be just a little bit more diverse, and that landed him on a spot on the main team for a while. Now in all honesty, that's all he did for the Avengers, make them just that tiny bit more diverse, so kudos to him for that, but maybe try being a better hero next time. Number 3, Almighty Dollar. With one of the best names in comic books ever in my opinion, J. Pennington Pennypacker was just an average certified public accountant before he attended a self-esteem camp known as Camp Run Amok. Turns out the camp was actually a front for a deranged scientist to use a special device to give people superpowers, and after being given superpowers without their consent, Pennypacker and his friends decided to put their abilities to good use by not only putting a stop to their captors, but also joining the NFL SUPERPRO's crime-fighting unit, earning themselves the name the Happy Campers. What was the power he gained, you ask? Well, J. Pennington Pennypacker gained the ability to shoot pennies out of his wrists. That's it. The only reason he's high up on this list today is because his power is actually kind of useful, just not in any battle unless it's a contest for who has the most money. Now that I think about it, we don't actually use pennies here in Canada anymore, so it might be pretty useless power in this day and age, but you know, whatever. Check him out for yourself alongside the other Happy Campers in 1992's NFL SuperPro number 10. Number 2, Friendly Fire. Now not a whole lot is known about Friendly Fire, as we don't know his real name, and his origins are pretty up in the air. With the power to shoot bolts of energy out of his hands, this superhero had the ability to easily be Section 8's strongest team member, but as his name would imply, Friendly Fire could only strike his allies. Sort of. He was a terrible shot, so he constantly hit his friends and not the villains they were facing off against. Once a member of the hero team Section 8, which was basically just a big old group of heroes that nobody else wanted to team up with. I mean, come on, their members consisted of a guy who carried around a window to throw at people, and another guy who just welded dead dogs to villains. Friendly Fire really looked like a superstar compared to these guys. His final adventure was probably the worst out of all of them though, because instead of hitting the villain with his powers, he ended up just straight up blowing off his own head. Check out this tragic yet hilarious story for yourself in 1997's Hitman number 18. And number 1, Hindsight Lad. Carlton Lafrage, the all-around nerd misfit who just blackmailed his neighbor Speedball into letting him join the New Warriors, which they begrudgingly allowed. Now calling himself Hindsight Lad, Carlton was best described as the most annoying character on the planet, using the only ability he possessed to help the team. The ability to analyze how things could have gone better after a failed mission. Yep, that's right, Hindsight Lad was that guy. The know-it-all who only tells you what you need to know after it's too late to be of any use. During the Civil War arc, the powerless Hindsight suddenly became bigoted against his former New Warrior teammates, even running an anti-New Warriors website where he effectively doxed them by revealing their secret identities. Oh, and not to mention he laundered official Avengers funds to buy himself a new costume. I will give him this though, I guess this ability is kind of useful so you know what not to do next time, but from experience, I am really not a fan of people like this, so I would hate every second of being on a team with him. Check out probably the most punchable character in all of comic books in his first appearance in 1993's New Warriors Annual number 3.